It's good speaking with you today, Richard. And this is going to be a great topic on change issues in the supply chain. But before we start, can you provide a brief background of yourself?
Sure. Um, so, I'm a historian by background. My first degree was in ancient and medieval history. And after doing that, I spent quite a lot of time looking around the world trying to work out what would be uh, a useful career. And I studied languages and set up a theater company and traveled around quite a lot in the Middle East and in Spain and South America. And then eventually I kind of realized this burgeoning, this is back in the early 90s, I realized this area of logistics and what was just becoming supply chain was really a fascinating challenge. I went off and did a master's and found myself in the corporate consulting group of Unilever. I worked there for 4 years, mainly in Latin America. And then I came across a company called I2 Technologies, and I worked for them for 10 years doing projects around Europe with Continental Tires, down in Spain with Carrefour, and then up in Nokia for 4 years. And then when they were bought by JDA, I left, and I spent 5 years looking at the area of supply of essential medicines to by ministries of health in Africa. Worked in Sierra Leone, Mozambique, um, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Mali. And then one of the observations I had there was that it was hard to change things when a Ministry of Health was running a supply chain, and I became interested in the idea of outsourcing quite a lot of this. And at the same time, an old I2 colleague of mine approached me and said, hey, we've just joined TCS, Supply Chain Center of Excellence. And so I joined that about 2 years ago, and now I'm a partner in the Supply Chain Center of Excellence at TCS, looking at how we can do perhaps planning as a service to some organizations and help people transform their supply chains using the heft of the very large organization that is TCS.
Thank you.
So
Well, my and my
that's how I got.
and, my first question is, why is this subject worth looking at?
So over my sort of 20 odd years of experience in the supply chain, I've seen a large number of, and I would say, yeah, around 50% have really failed to deliver the value that they set out to deliver, and at least 20-30% have failed pretty much completely. And this is not something that, if there is such a thing as a supply chain community, people talk about very widely. Certainly at conferences, we tend to hear the success stories, and I'm actually more interested in failure because I think there's a lot of it about. We learn more from failure. And so I started looking into this about 3 or 4 years ago. I went and in fact studied a master's at Oxford University around change, and I'm trying to understand what it is that makes supply chain projects go wrong. You will see people stand up and they'll talk about their project and they'll talk about change management, and they'll say sort of very quickly, oh yes, and change management was an issue, and then they say, anyway, moving on. It's a difficult thing to talk about because it's politically sensitive often and involves emotions, and supply chain guys being, as we are, mainly a bunch of engineers, sometimes I think there's a lack of the language to talk about this kind of stuff. So it's my mission at the moment is to try and introduce some psychodynamic concepts and general theories of change into the supply chain space.
And what are some of these key concepts for such as the organization and other aspects of structure?
Okay, well, one example, one idea that I like a lot is that there are different types of problems. So you have critical problems where things are like a pandemic of a disease, where you really need a top-down management style. But you also have a thing called wicked problems, and these are kind of problems which are never really solved. They're just problems that you try and ameliorate and deal with. And this could be something like, for example, the obesity trend that we're seeing at the moment. And to deal with that, a top-down management doesn't really work. You can't go around and just sort of forbid people from eating. You need a much more complex series of actions in order to deal with that kind of problem. And these are called wicked problems. It's a sort of a known concept, and these problems with a sort of no stopping rule. And every time you try and engage with them, you will find that you also affect them, rather like an anthropologist would affect the people that he studies. And my hypothesis is that, of course, some supply chain problems absolutely are dealt with in a top-down manner. If you're looking at perhaps redesigning your network and making major sourcing decisions, this is something you can just say as a leader, make it so. But there are other kinds of problems where really you need to engage the people who are actually running the supply chain and get their input. And this could be things like forecasting, sales and operations planning, production planning in a plant. And I've seen too many programs take a top-down approach.
And where have you seen some success with change in the supply chain?
Oh, sorry, I had you on my car phone, and you've now gone on. It's switched off. You hear me? Okay.
Oh yeah, it was low for a moment, but now it's back.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Sorry, could you repeat that last question again?
Well, I was thinking of asking, where have you seen success at change in supply chain? Would that be a good question, or
okay, well, I'd rather talk about failure. But yeah, no, I mean, I can give you an example where I worked at a company which I can't name. It's a very large consumer goods company, and they wanted to implement inventory optimization. And what they found was that it was very hard to get the sales guys on board with this, the complicated solution. And they were trying to roll it out for their downstream finished product. And in the end, it pretty much fell on its face. The lack of senior support and understanding for it, and the idea of complicated algorithms setting inventory levels was something that they just couldn't really swallow as an organization. Then interestingly, they engaged us, we have been working on that area. They then engaged us to do inventory optimization for some of their raw materials. So it's a single echelon optimization. They had a very large inventory of particular raw material, about 500 million of it, but this was sort of the yearly drop. And there we did inventory optimization as a service, and our relationship was very different in the sense that this was something that we were providing to them rather than imposing on them. And it was a much more successful project. We actually managed to set it up, run it, and then they now do this on a yearly basis. And I don't do it anymore, but the company that I was working with then carry on going in and doing a yearly fix for them, which is a different approach to dealing with the area of setting inventory targets. And I think that was.
And do you have any final recommendations for implementing change in the supply chain?
I think the key is to have these discussions up front early. What I've seen on most programs is that when there have been large change issues, it's because there's been an unspoken issue, which could be something like people having there being a forecast bias, or there being a lot of politics around how capacity in plants is measured, or who owns inventory. And if there are big organizational issues about this at the beginning of the project, particularly if it's an implementation of a tool designed to facilitate a new process, if you don't address those issues up front, they will always come back and bite you. And you can't hide in the supply chain. If there is dysfunctional behavior driven by an incongruity, this will always come out, because you can't fake it in the supply chain. Either the product is there or the product is not there. And so this is what drives, I think, a lot of strange behavior on improvement projects. It's when, for one reason or another, the burning issue, people talk about often on projects about the emperor's new clothes. organizations that have done that and have taken them sometimes 10 years to really change the way people think about it. But once you actually embed supply chain thinking, then some of these problems go away. But as long as supply chain is seen as a kind of backroom activity, without it's not given the importance and is perhaps overridden by marketing or finance objectives, you'll see that supply chain projects that are setting out to provide the end-to-end logical optimum will fall flat on their faces because they are actually going against the currents in the organization. So yeah, these are I think my main thing is for anybody who's involved in a program, you need to get in early on and have the difficult conversations up front and be prepared to say we're not going to proceed because we feel there's unresolved issues here, because there's no point in plowing on with practicalities of the project if you haven't dealt with the underlying politics.
And thanks for sharing today, Richard, on change issues in the supply chain.